I want to thank Father Michael for inviting me to preside and preach today. Apart from the cathedral and the chapel of the Sisters of St. John the Divine, this is the only parish church in the Diocese of Toronto where I've done so this past year. Transfiguration is a special place, and I especially want to commend your gifted priest and the dedicated staff and lay leaders of this parish for the great ministry in which you are so faithfully engaged. Today I'm not going to speak about forgiveness and reconciliation. The hymns and the vocals today are well worth pondering and more than adequately provide commentary on this gospel theme. But I want to speak to you today about vision and money. In the reading from Exodus today, we hear nothing about money. We hear of the great moment of deliverance of God's people, the Hebrew people. They were fleeing slavery and oppression, seeking the freedom and life that God was promising. They came to a barrier that looked insurmountable, and they were certain they would die. God had plans for them, but it required their courage and faith. Go through the sea, and I will save you. Fat chance. An ancient Jewish midrash on this text says that when Moses took the risk and stepped into the sea, the waters did not part. He was chest high before they abated. He had to keep going. Sometimes you just have to take that step of faith. Once through the sea, you would assume that the path forward was straight and the vision clear. Not so. In spite of that optimistic last verse in today's reading, the people feared the Lord and believed in the Lord and his servant Moses. At the very first stop, the complaints started. And they wanted to go back, even knowing that it meant slavery and certain death. But they grudgingly went on, murmuring all the way, and went on to discover in this journey that they were drawn into covenant with the God of life and possibility. And they began the long process of being formed into the holy people of God. And as they finally entered the promised land, they were commanded to offer the first fruits of the land to God, in recognition that it was not by their cunning or their labor or their strength that had got them there, but by God's leading. And in sacrificially offering the riches and resources of the land, it was not giving stuff to God, who needs nothing, but sharing rather than hoarding these, acknowledging them as gifts to build and to sustain the life of the whole community. The reluctant and hesitant faith of those ancient Hebrews, in all its triumphs and tragedies, has reshaped the world. And it's in continuity with them and that heritage that we come today. 19 years ago, this past week, I was installed as the 11th Bishop of Toronto. It's hard to believe it was that long ago. I'd been a suffragan bishop less than a year when Archbishop Finlay announced his retirement plans and called for the election of a new diocesan bishop. I agonized over whether I should let my name stand for election. As Archbishop Finlay's executive assistant for more than a decade, I knew as well as anyone the work that was entailed in this office. But what worried me most was the need to be a fundraiser, to ask people I don't know for money, to ask people I did know for money. It terrified me. Yes, I'd done it in my parish ministry, but not at the scale that was required. Fundraising, in my mind, was a necessary evil, but it certainly was an evil nonetheless. And with great anxiety, enough after much prayer, I agreed to the nomination. And when I was elected, I stood shaking on the chancel steps of the cathedral and looked over to the window on my right, to the window of Bishop John Strachan, the legendary first Bishop of Toronto, the preeminent fundraiser, and thought, what have I done? In my Episcopal ministry, I learned something important that changed my attitude to money and to stewardship. And it came because of a shift in the focus of the diocese, a shift to a missional model of ministry. We were busy in not just maintaining the amazing heritage that we had received, but engaging with hope and imagination in what could be. How worship could undergird our ministry of proclamation of the good news of Jesus Christ. How it could undergird the embodiment of that good news in our compassionate service to others. We had a faith worthy of sharing and the opportunities to do so. But we needed new resources to do that. Addressing Synod in 2007, I made the outrageous proposal that we should undertake a diocesan-wide financial campaign to raise perhaps $70 million. You should have heard the gasps in the room. The needs were there, and some knew that, but not everyone did. But if you do not have vision, you cannot ask for support. And if you don't ask, you don't receive. So we put together a compelling vision that could be easily communicated. And it was delayed and then reduced by the severe recession that took place in 2008, year before the campaign began. But the needs were still there and urgent. When we finished 7 years later, over $40 million had been raised through the official campaign and closer to 50 when parish campaigns that piggybacked on the diocesan-wide campaign were included. How did that change me? I had to confront my attitudes towards money and my faith. I had to step out into deep waters without knowing whether they would part or whether I would drown. Like others, I was personally asked to make a contribution and was stretched to imagine what that might be. It was a stretch for sure, and what I learned was that it was not only possible, but it felt right. And I didn't miss what I gave away. That has changed my pattern of personal giving, and my wife and I now give between 15 and 20% of our annual income to charity. Not all of it to the church, but it has enhanced rather than diminished my lifestyle. The only downside is that I get audited by CRA every year because they don't believe my tax returns. Of course, not everyone is in a position to do that, but generosity is not tied to a specific amount or a specific percentage. It's an attitude to life, an openness to God, to the graciousness of the created order, to the world and people around us. It's an act of gratitude for life and a desire to participate in sharing that gift to make a difference. The second change was my attitude about asking. I had to challenge myself to take some risks. I remember being counseled to ask a particularly generous couple for a gift of $5 million. I was shocked. And I said that I would ask for a quarter of that, and even that was a stretch. No, I was advised, ask for $5 million. The morning I was to meet with them, I was quaking in the shower, and then it dawned on me. The universities, the hospitals, wouldn't hesitate to make such an ask. Did I think that they were more worthy recipients of the funds than the mission of the church? No, I responded to myself. Then ask. And I did, still quaking, but now convinced. So did they give it? A couple weeks later, they responded apologetically that they could give only $3 million. But over the years since, they have given much, much more. Now, I use the story for asking such a large amount to get your attention, but the same story repeated itself with much more modest but equally sacrificial amounts from faithful people responding to a need, to a vision, and a request. What I learned was that asking for money was really entering into a conversation about faith. Bishop Art Brown told the story of visiting a man to ask for a major gift. Bishop Brown hemmed and hawed and danced around the ask, and finally the man in frustration said, "How much do you want, Art?" When a large figure was named, the man blurted out, "Jesus Christ, I don't think my faith is worth that much." Bishop Brown later quipped that it was the man's most fervent prayer ever offered. The man, then suddenly quiet, added, "What have I just said?" He went away and thought about how much his faith was worth. Worship comes from an old English word that means worthship. Worthship. The act of offering yourself to that which is the highest value, the highest worth in your life, and putting everything else in order below that. We all worship something or someone. Who or what do we worship? And is what we worship worth the sacrifice? Does it open it up to a world and to its wonders? Does it engage us to offer the very best of our efforts? Does it call us to a deeper, more sacrificial love? Does it draw us out of ourselves and into service for the greater good? Does it call to join in a holy and life-giving endeavor? The faith that we proclaim in Jesus Christ, in his death and resurrection and continuing gift of the Spirit, does do exactly that. The church he calls to be his active presence in the world has that mission at its very heart. Do you think the church is worth your time, effort, and gifts? Sometimes when we in the church ask for money, for the resources necessary to do our mission and ministry, we are apologetic. The ask is sometimes more out of desperation than anything visionary. We frame it as a grudging duty rather than an act of thanksgiving. We beg for leftovers rather than frankly and compellingly state the need to support something of great worth. Investment in the mission that has the power to change lives and transfigure the world. Transfig the hill. I'm impressed with your vision, to connect with your site and with the surrounding community, to mark the character of this place as Christian space that offers life in abundance for all who would seek it, to nurture kids who will know that they are loved and have purpose and value in God's world. It's simple. It's doable. It will make a difference. It is well worth the risk of faith and the commitment to realize it. So take the step into the deep waters of faith, and you will be amazed at what can happen. Amen.